go into my kit for painting on location. I just do simple landscapes, and I started it as a sort of travel journal. I got the idea from a YouTuber actually that I really liked his watercolors. His name is Bucci, and I'm gonna link to him below because it's just very inspirational. And he talks about his kit and some of his materials and things like that. And the other person I was influenced by was a website called JohnMuirLaws. Now that is John Muir as in this guy, the founder of our national park system, who I actually share a name with, but unfortunately am not related. Anyway, the JohnMuirLaws guy does a lot of field sketching, and I wanted to start doing that. I thought it was a really great way to combine art with nature, and it's kind of the theme of my channel. So yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out to my inspirations and what got me started in this in the first place. So I'm on book number 2 actually, and just briefly, it's just a simple watercolor book, and my only issue with it is that the pages, they don't hold up well enough to water that I'm really super happy with it. My last journal was a little bit weak against water as well, but unfortunately a lot of these pre-done journals are just like this. So Bucci, for example, he makes his own, and I've been researching ways to do that as well, and I think that my next journal, I'm going to try one more, and it's going to be like a block, which means the paper is like, you know, all in a block, and I think it would keep it from warping as bad, and then you tear the paper. But some people were saying that the paper was like actually like ripping and tearing the surface, so it might not end up working, but I'm gonna try it anyway. Now these are all from a recent trip to Utah that I did, and I really like a lot of them. Some of them I think could have turned out better, but the whole point is just to paint and not judge, just be in the moment, feel the place around you, and just, you know, paint spontaneously. Try and put, you know, your feeling into the picture and not overthink it. So that's what I started doing. My first set was in Maine, which I don't have that book to show at the moment. I think it's upstairs. But anyway, yeah, it's just getting yourself to do the work. And what's fun about this is it really is true that when you look back at things you painted on site, it's better than a photograph because you remember the feeling of being there and painting it. You remember the temperature, maybe sight, sounds, or smells. So it's just an immersive sort of documentation of where you've been. Now, how I do these is I actually tape it off, and then I draw the line, and then I paint it. Actually, I do the signature first too now because the pen tips get clogged if you do any sort of ink work over watercolor. I killed several Micron pens that way, several Copic pens that way. You just live and learn. This part I do at the end just because it feels like a really good finalization of the piece, kind of like signing it, but you can't sign it at the end or else you're gonna clog all your stuff. So this one was actually more local. And then what I started doing is now, every time I finish one, I pre-tape the area for the next one, because I found that when I peeled up the tape, and I was just peeling up the tape and throwing it away, now I peel up the tape, I put it on the next page. Now there's a lot less to do when I get to a place and I'm like, oh, I feel something, I want to try and capture this in, you know, in a painting. Now I've given myself less of a hurdle or a barrier to actually get down to the painting. So now instead of going and pulling tape and taping my edges and getting everything just so, and, you know, the ruler the ruler that I used broke actually, but it was a really tiny T-square, just a little plastic one, but I was carrying it around in my bag, my daily bag, and it broke recently. But it was really great. It was just clear plastic, and I would put it over the tape. I have its broken body here. I can show you. Pretend this is a T-square, which means it has a flat edge right here, so you can get it perfect. And then here I would have to trace backwards, but I would hold it here and make the line, and then I would make the lines like this, and just, you know, flip the T-square around so that you can, sorry if I'm out of frame, so that you can mark the lines down, and be careful to let the ruler overlap the edge of the tape a little bit, because if you don't and it drags through this sticky stuff a lot, you will eventually clog your pen, and you don't want that. Right, so then you do your lines. It's the only thing you have to do before doing a picture. You do the picture, let it dry a little bit, and then kind of lift it out of the way and peel these up one by one. I leave a little bit more of a gap on the bottom so that I can do the signature on the bottom. See how that's about the width of my finger, and then this is a little bit extra. Okay, so that's the book, that's the method. So I carry this guy with me. It's a nice size. When I paint, and I have this beast here, what I actually would do is sort of hold it like this, like on the edge, or I would hold this like on my knee and have this open. But there's definitely been times where I held it like this and painted. This actually broke in Utah. It flung itself out of the car and shattered into a million pieces, and I just taped it to hold it together temporarily. It's a little ghetto, but you know, we do what we have to do. I had that tape on hand, and that's how I was going to make it work. So this is my carry kit. I carry this bag. It has a waterproof liner, so if anything's a little wet, it doesn't get onto anything in my bag. Like, God forbid one of your water pens leaks and it gets on your journal and wrecks some of the paintings you've done. So I have a couple of things like magic marker. I was sometimes lining my pictures with that. I have a gum eraser. And the blue pencil is to do very light sketches. Maybe you're just determining where a mountain is or something like that. Like this one, for instance. I sort of figured out how much of the landscape I was going to capture, whereabouts things fell. And see, this one I forgot to do the line. So you just get these little accidents. You could Bob Ross it and say happy accidents, but all of those things change the feel. It's like framing a picture. The frame makes a huge difference. And having a thick border versus a thin border versus no border, I mean, you could do whatever you want. This is one of the few that I did a white gouache, because once you do the watercolor, you can't really go back and do lighter things. So if you want to do little touches of a lighter color, say like on this aspen tree, you kind of need a gouache, which is essentially opaque watercolor, so that it won't just get lost. White watercolor, it's not going to show up, but it just lightens. Like, you could lighten the sky from like this color to this color with the white. I think it looks a little funky to use the white. I generally don't. And I generally just use color. I don't use black very often. And I try and just mix the color and lay it down, because the less you fuss, the better the pictures seem to turn out. Okay. Now, for the gouache. I don't think the brand matters too heavily. I mean, you could test stuff out. So you just get a little tube. Fun fact, there are like no art stores in Maine. I had to get that when I got back. And then a little paintbrush to do the gouache. This is something I did recently where instead of carrying the whole big roll of tape, the artist tape, the roll is about this big. It's very clunky, and if you're trying to be minimal and do travel out of a very small bag, I took a hint from like hiking stuff where you want to be really minimal when you're backpacking, and people do duct tape like around a bottle or something. So I took a bottle, I reversed the tape in one layer, and then I just wound it like a tape roll and took it off. So now I have this very lightweight piece. And it's also helped by the fact that I'm reusing my tape. I don't need a lot of new tape because the tape will work for probably at least 4 pictures before it starts losing its grip. So very minimal. And then the pens. Okay, so I pretty much grew up using micron pens. A friend of my brother's was an artist. He did little commission drawings of people, and he used Sacro micron pens. So that's what I used because I figured they're good, right? So I used that, and then now, since recently, I found that the tape or the tips were kind of like drying up, and when you're drawing with them, they get a little dry and skipping and stuff like that. So I thought, hey, I'll try something else. I tried the Copic multi-liner. It is waterproof. It works great with watercolors. You know, just whenever you use these things, give it a minute to dry out a little bit just in case you have any residual moisture. Like, just let it set on your paper. I really actually like this a lot. Now, I have this tape around it because this one, I wrecked the tip. And it is possible to declog a tip. I need to make a video on that, but this one I haven't had a chance to do. I was just out, I was in Maine, this got clogged. I put tape so I'd remember that it was basically messed up. 0.3 is a good one for this. And like I said, no art stores in Maine. You were hard pressed to find anything even at like an office supply store. So I had to go to Walmart. It was like the only thing that had a chance of having any art supplies. And this is what I found. This is what I had to take a chance on. This random Sharpie pen. You know, it's got a little nib. These are all nib based. And it works good. I was really surprised with it. I messed it up too with doing the signatures on a painted watercolor piece. So do not do that unless you love messing up a pen after like one use. Several uses if you get lucky. Just, you know, don't do it. Copic multi-liner. Here's what this guy looks like. They're all basically the same. They just have the nib tip. It's like a super tiny felt tip, and the watercolor particles clog it up. And graphite can clog it up. Anything can clog it up. So if you need to use these, put your lines down first, put your signature down first, put whatever down first. Don't do this over other media. You can, but you'll be sorry. Okay, being that I had all these issues with clogging things, and before I just altered my process, I got this guy. So these are disposable Copic multi-liner pens. You're just intended to use them up. Therefore, they're cheaper. This is the cheapest. Microns are around, you know, a couple dollars, like $3. This was about probably roughly the same, maybe a little cheaper. It comes in a 2-pack. Let's call that $2 a pen. This, I can't recall entirely, but it's probably $4 or $5. It's got a really great smooth feel to it though, so I think it's my favorite overall. Now, I got this version of it. It's got this metal casing. This guy is refillable, and it has reusable parts. So the nib, you can get replacement nibs. So if you do forget and you do screw up and you're out in the wilderness or in the city or wherever you're at and you're trying to draw and you need a line and you jacked up your tip, don't worry. What you can do is buy an extra. I got a couple when I got this thing. And you can see this one's a used one. This is the tip I messed up. I didn't think I was going to need to use it, and yet I did. You just pop that bad boy in there, give it a little time for the ink to settle through here. It will be white when it's in the package, and then you also can get spare ink. Forget where that is because I didn't have to do that yet. You can replace this guy. So, super cool, reusable parts, and the parts are less weight than, you know, a whole extra pen. So you could have like 3 tip backups and 1 ink backup just in case, and it's a lot less cumbersome than, say, carrying a million gajillion pens. Like, basically this. And if space is at a premium, you will care about that. Another essential item, paper towel. You just put it in your kit, you use it. When you're done with it, you can throw it away. Just have one of these in your kit at all times. If you're traveling and you get low, or you totally use this thing up, it's easy to obtain, but what you don't want to do is get in a situation where you forgot to pack one, you pull out your kit, you go to paint, and you have nothing. Because then what you're going to do, use this. You're going to start wiping stuff off on your hand or on your jeans or whatever, and it'll work, but it's not ideal. This is my very first water brush pen. When I discovered you could use these instead of paintbrushes, I was at a convention and I watched somebody work and I was like, oh my God, what is that? I need that. Because you just squeeze it a little bit, you get the water in your palette, in your color, and then you just paint directly with it. You don't need external water, you just squeeze it a little bit and wipe it off on the paper towel, like so, and that will clean the tip. You don't need to do the whole dunk and rinse thing, which is so liberating. So this one works really good. It's Kuretake, Kuretake. That's a Japanese brand. These are pretty cheap, super awesome. I think they're always this like blue and pink. I love that one. That is my go-to. This is the most similar. I do not love this pen, and it was way more expensive than my Kuretake. Faber-Castell, I think you're just paying for the name. I don't think they thought this completely out. I think you can even almost see it, but it practically leaks water. I mean, it won't leak into your bag, but like everything's sopping wet. And you have this huge reservoir, which means it's a little bit different to fill. So on the Kuretake, what you do is you stick it in some water, you know, invert it, squeeze it, and it sucks up the water. And then you're good. In a pinch, what I did when I was traveling is I would have, say, bottled water or a jug of water, and I would basically, you know, put it in the cap, pretend this is a cap, and then I would use that to suck the water out. I had forgotten to plan for this, but, you know, you get innovative when you don't have a plan, and it all worked out. So, you know, this style is squeeze and fill up, as is this little guy, but I'll get to that. This one, you have to definitely like plunge it into water. This has a screw off, but on this one you depress this and you suck the water up by pulling it back out, and then to get rid of the air I would just, you know, slowly slowly squeeze that back up. And when you see the water get to here, you can then dunk it and repeat the process. It's more fussy than I thought it would be. It's less functional than I thought it would be, especially at the price. This is at least a $10 pen. The $10 Frankenstein Copic pen where you can interchange all the parts, that was worth it. That was a good $10. This was a $10 that I would take back. How you use it is you've got this little area that is squeezy and this part is hard. So it's kind of funky to kind of depress this to get the water out. So I don't enjoy using this. The water is like inconsistent. You know, it's very wet. I didn't even like do anything. It's super wet. What it could be considered good for is doing washes, like if you want to do like a big sky and do a lot of water. And what I would do is like this is aggravating. This is, in no way do I feel like I have any control over the water flow with this. It's like you're pushing, it's dry, and then bleh. Then you have a whole lot of water to deal with. Now, if you're trying to have a lot of water, like put it over your whole canvas, I just hold this down and go over the area like the sky or whatever, and then I go and get a little color and then wash it in. So yeah, I would not recommend this. Not a fan. If you have paper that can handle really heavy washes, then this might become more useful, but I think that's going to come from using my own paper and creating my own journal, because the watercolor paper I've used so far in these pre-made journals, that does not work well with that. So then I got this dude with a flat tip. And I would say, you know, if I run out of water on this one and I'm out, I can just switch to this one and paint mostly the same way and not feel too hindered. The brand is Pentel, but it's essentially the same dynamic as the other one, and I have no complaints with it. I thought it would be better for doing washes than the other one, but honestly, this guy does everything. If I could only have one pen, hands down, this one. This was an interesting experiment. I could chuck it in the bin and not care. I guess the only gripe with this one is it doesn't have any sort of little like hook on the cap like these guys do, which helps prevent rolling. I mean, this one's a little more rolly, but yeah, that's the only issue I really have with it. It has a smaller reservoir, so it's a little more portable. Same squeeze action, good control. Most of these you can put the cap right on the back if you want. I tend to not do that because it weights it weird. It makes the pen more heavy, and I don't know, it feels a little annoying to have that on there. But if you don't mind the extra weight, you can definitely cap it on there. I just set it aside somewhere where I'm not going to lose it. And that's basically it. That is my entire process, basically. And I can grab my other journal to show what that looks like. Okay, I came back with my other journal. This was the first one. I just was getting into drawing from my surroundings. Here is where water went really wrong. I actually started doing music too. This was a multi-purpose journal. I do music stuff on my other channel. I felt I'd keep them separate. This was actually a photocopy of a drawing I did, but my coworker wanted it, so I went ahead and tore it out. And here I have a Poe. This I was using the pens that I showed you. Basically, the most fun to draw with was the Copics, and it gives you a lot of easy texture. You can get really dark and light. There, you can see you get a lot of great texture. Super happy with those. I hadn't quite done watercolor on site until here. This is when I went to Maine. I didn't have my system down whatsoever. I was just trying to get in the mode of drawing and painting and not judging. It's really important. This is the first one I was really, really happy with because I just was doing color and I got in the moment, and I think that's really where you want to be. Not worrying about how it's going to turn out, just as long as it's pleasing to you, and not all of them will be, but the more you do, the more of them you're going to have ones you like. Like this one, I did not have gouache, so I could not do the white of this boat, and I was very frustrated. So this picture really bugs me because of that. But if I ignore that, then the rest of it is fine. It's a very high view of tiny little islands called the Porcupine Islands. And you can see I'm using a different pen now from before because I messed up the tips. Closer on here, if you look at the lines, you see how it's a little bit uneven. That was when you get a little too close to the tape, so it's good to draw the line about 1 millimeter off of the tape so that you don't get this sort of issue, and you can have it be a little more consistent. It doesn't really hurt it too much. I mean, the line is a little bit off. I think this is when I was still drawing the line after the fact and thoroughly wrecking my tips eventually. It worked for a while, so I didn't realize, but you know, then I realized. Oh, this is a picture I actually sold on site. I had just finished it. I hadn't even pulled the tape up and somebody wanted to buy it, so I do need to put a photocopy of it in here. And this one I did right after. And then here I'm doing a different style. Now this has ink in it as well as watercolor, but again, you're doing the ink first, colors second. Do not do it the other way around, or else you will have bad news for your nibs just failing on you. I did save some of them, and I will do a video on that. I believe that's all the art stuff. Yeah. Here's the start of a sketch. You know, these are really easy to do like on a plane or something, you know, just studies. And the scenic ones, you know, you do when you're somewhere. But yeah, so that's the journals. And I hope that was helpful to see how things are done, or a way things could be done. And maybe that will give you guys an idea of something you want to start on. Cold as ice and Coca-Cola.